Hello, my dears. Welcome to the Spicy Stories channel, where you will find several spicy stories. I want to share with you a story that happened to me. Stay until the end of the video because you will learn everything about my story that I had never told before, but I plucked up the courage. And I want to extend an invitation to you at the end. I am already happy to see you here, so let's go. I was 50 years old. Life had taught me to be independent and to trust my own path, without depending on anyone to feel complete. My job as an editor in New York provided me with stability and security, but inside there was something that told me that I was missing something. Maybe love, or maybe the lack of it. Most nights, after a tiring day, I would sit alone in my comfortable apartment with a glass of wine and a book in my hands. I had gotten used to loneliness. The idea of starting something new, a romance, seemed like something from the past. A phase of my life that was already over, so when he showed up, I wasn't prepared. I first saw him in a bookstore I used to frequent, the kind of place where books seem to embrace you and the hustle and bustle of New York fades into the background. He was standing in front of the photography section, looking at a book about the work of a famous photographer. His gaze was intent, as if each word in the book was a clue he needed to follow. He had a calm yet energetic presence. I watched him for a few minutes, unsure whether I should approach him or if he was just lost in thought. And then he turned, and our eyes met. Something in those eyes made me stop. He smiled, a genuine, unhurried smile. And before I knew it, he was standing next to me, talking about photography and how inspired he was by images. It was as if we were in a parallel universe where the age difference between us wasn't a concern. Do you like photography too, or just books? I hesitated before answering, my mind trying to organize the words, wondering if I should walk away. But something about him made me want to continue the conversation. I'm more of a bookworm than a photographer, but yes, I appreciate images. They're like silent words. I've always thought that images have the ability to tell stories that words can't. I'm a photographer, and I see the world through the lens of a camera. It's a way of learning to live in the moment. I was surprised by the depth of his words. He was 30, but his manner of speaking seemed much more mature than his age suggested. He was young, but somehow there was something about him that drew me in. Our conversation continued for a few more minutes. When he told me that he had only recently lived in New York but had fallen in love with the city, the connection was instantaneous. I felt that he was comfortable with me, in no rush to leave, not wanting to be something he wasn't. I, on the other hand, felt hesitant, knowing that he was younger, knowing that what might come of it might be fleeting. But something about that moment felt right, and before I knew it, we had exchanged phone numbers. I was in shock with myself, but in a good way. Maybe love had found its way back into my life, just in a very different form than I had imagined. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. When he texted me to ask if I wanted to grab coffee, I accepted without hesitation. But as the meeting drew closer, doubts began to creep in. I was 50. He was 30. Did he really see me as anything more than a passing experience? I felt uneasy for a while. The age difference, which had once seemed like a statistic, was now screaming in my head. Ethan was young, with his whole life ahead of him. And me? What did I have to offer a man so full of life, who was still discovering the world? He still had all the freedom to explore, to travel, to live without the responsibilities that I already carried. I had a past, a solid career, and a set of expectations for life that didn't align well with his adventurous spirit. When we met at the cafe, he seemed so relaxed, so natural. He was at ease, while I felt a little out of place. But soon his words began to dispel my worries. I always thought that the age difference is just a matter of perspective. If two hearts connect, why worry about the rest? The way he spoke with such confidence made me feel a little more at ease, but there was still a part of me that couldn't fully accept the idea. He was interested in me. I knew that. But did he know what he was really looking for? Would I be able to join him in his quest for new and exciting experiences? As our dates continued, my insecurity grew. I was afraid of being rejected, of being seen as an older woman trying to relive her youth. It was as if the weight of my age became more and more visible, despite all the signs that the connection between us was genuine. One night, as we were walking through Central Park, he took my hand naturally, as if it were something we had done a long time ago. But at that moment, my mind was invaded by a whirlwind of thoughts. I was 50. He was 30. I had wrinkles around my eyes, and he had smooth, youthful skin. I bore the marks of a life lived, and he was just beginning to build his. I found myself pulling my hand back. Ethan, I don't know if you really understand the difference between us. He stopped, looked at me for a moment, and with a calmness that surprised me, he replied, I do, Emma, but in the end, the only thing that matters to me is how you make me feel. I feel good with you. I don't see your age, I see you. He didn't care. He saw me, not as someone who was 50, but as someone he wanted to be with. And in that moment, I realized that my fear of getting older, of being judged, was keeping me from what I really wanted. I decided to let myself live the experience without any more fears. I didn't know where this would lead, but I didn't want to hold on to fear of judgment or doubt any longer. Ethan was someone who made me feel alive, someone who was willing to challenge the norms, to love without restrictions. With each passing day, the barriers I had put up for myself began to fall. What had started as a casual connection was turning into something deep, and more importantly, real. I didn't need any more justifications. There was no more room for insecurities. Love was who we were, without masks, without fears. I was giving myself over to something new, without worrying about what others thought. And in the end, it was this decision to follow my heart that set me free. Finally, after months of intense meetings and conversations, Ethan and I decided to take a trip together to upstate New York, a quiet place far from the city that never sleeps. During that trip, I walked beside him without hesitation. We were together, as we were always meant to be. And as he smiled at me, I knew with certainty that it didn't matter how old we were. What mattered was that we had found each other. I was ready to follow this path, with him by my side, no longer afraid of what the future would bring. In the days that followed our trip, something changed. It wasn't that the dynamic between us had changed drastically, but inside me there was a growing feeling. Something that, until then, I had avoided confronting. Love. Or maybe it was more than that. It was surrender. It was the abandonment of the defenses that I had built over the years to protect myself from disappointment and pain. I was allowing myself to feel deeply. Ethan seemed to have no doubts. He had the same intensity, the same smile, the same energy that he had always had since the moment we met. But unlike me, he didn't carry the same uncertainties. For him, what mattered was being with me. That made me question how much I was willing to risk. I still found myself looking at him from time to time with a mixture of admiration and fear. He was 30, and I was 50. He was young, with his life ahead of him. I was already in a more mature phase, and although my life had been satisfying so far, I couldn't help but wonder, was I ready to open up to him in such a profound way? That night, he came to my apartment after a long day of work. I looked at him and saw the man he was becoming, a man who was confident and unashamed to express what he felt. He looked at me affectionately, unhurriedly, and pulled me closer. We sat on the couch, and he hugged me silently but meaningfully. Emma, I don't want you to worry about the future. I know we have our differences. I know you have your doubts, but I'm here, and I want to be here for you, every day. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't just empty promises. He was showing me with his actions that what he really wanted was to be my partner, without limitations. And even though the fear still lingered, I was beginning to believe him, to trust us. Every day, the love between us became more palpable. The words we exchanged were more sincere, deeper, and the affection we shared was becoming more and more natural. But with that, Emma's fears also emerged more clearly. My head was still giving me advice that didn't make sense. He'll get tired of you. He'll want someone younger soon. What will he do with his life when you're 60 or 70? These thoughts became a constant presence in my mind, and I knew I needed to confront them. But I couldn't. How could I, after a lifetime of logic and reason had always guided my decisions? We discussed it one night, after a quiet dinner. I was silent, lost in my own thoughts, when he realized something was wrong. Emma, you're so distant. You're not here with us. I looked at him and saw the frustration on his face. He was trying to understand me, but deep down, I knew he had no idea how deeply I was struggling within myself. Ethan, I don't know if I can. I'm afraid. Afraid that I'm an illusion to you, that I'm a phase that you'll outgrow sooner or later. He was silent for a moment, as if he was considering my words. Then he leaned forward, his eyes locking with mine. Emma, I'm not with you because of your age. I'm with you because you're the person I want to be with. And none of that will change as long as I have a choice. And I have no doubts. You're in my life because I want you to be. Those words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. He wasn't there for a passing experience. He was there because he wanted to be. He wanted to build something real. But reality didn't disappear with pretty words. The age difference was still there, hanging over us like a shadow. Although Ethan didn't show any insecurity, the world around us still seemed to judge us. One afternoon after a social event, we were stopped by an acquaintance of mine. He asked Ethan, without thinking much, "Don't you think you're too young for her?" I felt a wave of shame, as if he were exposing me in some way, as if I were making a mistake. Ethan, always calm, answered without hesitation. "I'm young, but I'm not immature. And if you're talking about how I feel about her, then maybe you don't understand. But the truth is, for me, there's no age in love. There are only people." I felt the heat in my face, but not from the shame of the comment. It was because of the strength with which he defended me, because of the clarity and certainty with which he stood by me. He was right. What mattered was not what others thought, but what we both felt. At that moment, I began to understand that there was no more room for worrying about what others thought. I had to live for myself, and for what our love meant. As time went on, we began to accept each other more deeply. I began to relax and let love be, without trying to control or label it. Ethan and I discovered together the little moments that, for him, were the simplest things, and for me, became the most meaningful. One night, while we were at a small coffee shop in Greenwich Village, Ethan asked me to dance. There was no music, but he pulled me into a clear space, and suddenly we were there, dancing as if we were in our own choreography. There was no more doubt. Just him and me, in our own time. I don't care what other people think. What matters is what we have. I felt safe for the first time in a long time. Age didn't matter, or what other people expected of me. What I felt for him mattered more. As our relationship grew stronger, I realized that there was no more uncertainty. I was afraid, of course, but now I knew that the decision to stay by Ethan's side was mine, and no one else's. I was with him not because of a fairy tale, but because he was someone I wanted to share the next years of my life with. We talked about the future, about traveling together, about making new memories. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew I wanted to live with him. Not for a short time, but forever, if that were possible. And so, as we walked back to the apartment that night, our steps synchronizing, I knew that this love, despite all its complications, was the one I never wanted to let go of. Whatever the future held, it would be lived as truthfully as possible. And that was enough for me. Time passed faster than I expected. At first, our story seemed like one of those fleeting adventures, like a summer romance. But as the months passed, we created something more lasting. I was calmer now, and the insecurity I once felt began to dissipate, replaced by a quiet confidence that only time can provide. Ethan was still the anchor that kept me steady, even when the tides of doubt still tried to drag me away. He was patient, but most of all, he had a conviction that I never imagined I would find in someone so young. He knew what he wanted, and what he wanted was to be with me. That certainty in her eyes was what made me finally believe that it wasn't too late to live the kind of love I had always imagined for myself. We started talking about the future, about where we wanted to be in the next few years. Conversations about marriage, travel, and even children began to arise naturally. I knew that the life I shared with him had nothing to do with age or the time we had together. It was about what we built together, how we supported each other, and how we were better for each other. I no longer thought of myself as a 50-year-old woman who was wasting her time. I thought of myself as a woman who found something rare and precious in Ethan. He, in turn, never made me feel the age difference. He loved me as I am, without exceptions. By the time winter arrived, with its blizzards and icy New York landscapes, our relationship was already solid. We were a team. But as with any love story, the world around us still challenged our relationship. One afternoon, I was on the street, heading to an office meeting, when I saw an old acquaintance from a time when I was still trying to fit my world into the mold that society imposed on me. He stopped me, as if the conversation was inevitable, and began commenting on my relationship with Ethan. The tone wasn't directly offensive, but there was a slight judgment, an implicit doubt about the longevity of that union. "Don't you think it's strange, Emma? Such a big age difference. He's so young, and you're past a certain age for him to be interested, aren't you?" Those words hit me like a slap in the face. Before, I would have backed away, tried to justify my relationship in a polite way, maybe even walked away from Ethan. But this time, something inside me strengthened. I looked at him and took a deep breath before answering firmly. "I never asked for your approval, and I don't need it. What we have is real, and to me, that's all that matters. Ethan makes me happy. He loves me for who I am, not how old I am. And if you don't understand that, that's your problem, not mine." I felt free, freer than I ever thought I could feel. As I met my acquaintance's confused gaze, I realized that my trust in Ethan, and in our story, was at a level that no one else could shake. I no longer needed to seek validation from anyone. What I had with him was more than any social label, more than any criticism. It was our truth, and that was enough. Over time, the discussions about the age difference subsided. Ethan and I continued to live our lives, growing closer and closer. On one of the weekends when we decided to leave New York and take a trip to the countryside, he took me to a small winery in the Finger Lakes region. We were there alone with the stunning scenery all around us when he surprised me. "Emma, I want you to know that there is nothing in this world that would make me change my mind about us. You are the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. No matter what anyone says, what they think, or any obstacle that may come my way, I only want you." I was speechless. The love I felt for him grew every day, and hearing those words filled my heart with a happiness I thought I would never experience. It was the kind of love that comes from complete acceptance, where there is no more doubt, only trust and complicity. "I don't need anything else, Emma. Just you." I looked at him, and the sparkle in his eyes, so genuine and passionate, was all I needed to finally surrender to what was growing inside me. That love that I had previously feared now became my refuge, my home. Months later, on a quiet spring afternoon, Ethan proposed to me. It wasn't something grand or pompous. It was simple but meaningful. We were at our house after a home-cooked dinner, and with a shy and genuine smile, he took my hand. "Emma, we've been through so much together. And I know we still have so much more ahead of us. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my days by your side. Will you marry me?" I didn't know how to respond other than a simple yes, because in truth, all he wanted was my sincere answer. He loved me for who I was, and that was more than enough. I looked at him and said with all the certainty I had in me, "Yes, Ethan, yes I do." The wedding was simple but perfect. Our friends and family were there, and although there was still criticism from some people, we were unwavering. What we built was stronger than any external expectations. We were two hearts that met at the right time. From that day on, our life became a new journey. We were no longer concerned with what others thought or the obstacles society put in our way. What mattered was that Ethan and I were happy, and our happiness was our responsibility. Over time, I learned that love doesn't follow a pattern. There is no formula for it. Love is about surrendering to the moment, about trusting the other person and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Ethan taught me that. He showed me that no matter the age difference, what really matters is how we feel about each other. And in the end, that's what mattered. The love we created, that we built, was the greatest gift that life could give me. And with Ethan by my side, I knew the best was yet to come. I'm glad you made it this far. Now, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel if you are not already subscribed to receive all our videos. Like, share, and leave in the comments what you thought of my story. I promise I will read and like your comment. I want to talk to you. I'll leave it here and see you in the next video, okay? See you then.